Hello, my name is Holden Mays, and this is a report on the Digital Sampling Lab for AE 2610. The purpose behind this lab was to familiarize ourselves with the Digital Data Acquisition (DAQ) system and to determine the accuracy of a data sample acquired using a microphone relative to a data sample acquired using the provided audio jack. The DAQ used, the LabJack T4, converts inputted audio signals into viewable digital waveforms. When an audio signal is inputted, the LabJack software creates two graphs, a time history graph that depicts the signal's waveform, and the waveform's power spectrum graph, which shows the distribution of energy for different frequencies. The DAQ can only capture data at discrete intervals determined by the sampling rate, the number of samples taken in a second, and the record length, the number of samples in a record. The first portion of this lab was validating the microphone, determining the relative response of the DAQ using the microphone and speaker system, which quantifies the difference in signal strength between data acquired directly with an audio jack and data acquired using the speaker and microphone. The second portion of the lab, the individual experiment, involved determining the effect the distance between speaker and microphone has on the power spectrum for two frequencies, 1000 Hz and 2000 Hz. This experiment was chosen because its predicted outcome is already known. The signals are predicted to appear weaker as the distance between the microphone and speaker increase in accordance with the inverse square law. As such, any results that oppose this prediction will be easy to identify as questionable. To become familiar with reading waveforms, 11 audio tracks were used as DAQ signal inputs and identified by the resulting waveform graphs. Table 1 contains the waveform identification information for the provided tracks. The waveform type essentially describes the shape of the time history graph. The principal peak frequency refers to the frequency with the most energy, depicted as the absolute maximum in the power spectrum. The other peak frequencies are the frequencies with visible relative maximums. Both portions of the lab, the microphone validation and individual experiment, were conducted in an isolated room over a wooden desk moved near the center of the room. The microphone validation data was gathered using the provided 3.5mm audio jack and an online tone generator that played sine wave tones at 10 different frequencies between 20 Hz and 10,000 Hz. The tone generator volume was set to 75% and the device volume to 50%. The sampling rate was set to 25,000 samples per second and the record length to 1,000 samples. This data was also used as the control data for the individual experiment portion of the lab. The same 10 frequencies were then sampled at the same volume using the provided microphone and a laptop speaker. The microphone was held at a constant 7 centimeters away from the speaker. The individual experiment data was acquired similarly using the same volumes, tone generator, speaker, and microphone. Two frequencies were sampled, 1000 Hz and 2000 Hz, when the microphone was located 5 centimeters away from the speaker. This was done again at 10 centimeters, 15 centimeters, 20 centimeters, 25 centimeters, and 30 centimeters. Figure 1 contains the data acquired during the microphone validation portion of the lab. The root mean square voltage at each peak frequency is plotted against the 10 sine signal frequencies chosen. Notably, as the sampling rate was set to 25,000 samples per second and the record length to 1,000 samples, the DAQ only recorded data at intervals of 25 Hz. Half of the frequencies played were not divisible by 25. As such, for these signals, the data plotted in Figure 1 is instead the nearest recorded frequency. This causes the recorded amplitude at these frequencies to be lower than the actual peak amplitude. Figure 2 contains the relative response for the 10 signals, which is the root mean square voltage for a frequency recorded with the speaker and microphone divided by the same recorded with the audio jack. A relative response near 100% indicates that there is very little difference between the microphone data and audio jack data. Figures 3 and 4 contain the raw data recorded by the DAQ during the individual experiment when the microphone was held 5 centimeters away from the speaker. Figure 3 depicts the time history and power spectrum for a 1000 Hz sine signal, while Figure 4 depicts the same for a 2000 Hz signal. For both figures, an amplitude of about 2.5 VRMS is observed at 0 Hz. This is always present for data acquired with a microphone and will be ignored. Figures 5 and 6 contain the same, but for a microphone held 10 centimeters away from the speaker. Figures 7 and 8 are for a microphone held 15 centimeters away from the speaker. Figures 9 and 10 are for a microphone held 20 centimeters away from the speaker. Figures 11 and 12 are for a microphone held 25 centimeters away from the speaker. Figures 13 and 14 are for a microphone held 30 centimeters away from the speaker. Table 2 contains the peak root mean square voltages for both signals acquired through the methods previously described. Table 3 contains similar data, instead showing the relative response for each distance. Interestingly, the results were not as predicted. Signal amplitude was predicted to exclusively decrease with increased microphone distance in accordance with the inverse square law, which states that each doubling of distance from the speaker should be met with a decrease in signal amplitude of 6 decibels. In practice, this states that the peak root mean square voltages should decrease as the distance between the speaker and microphone increases. As there was no strong correlation observed between signal strength and microphone distance where there was expected to be, there is doubt cast on the validity of the data. It is difficult to draw any conclusions from the sampled data. In order for any conclusions to be drawn, future experiments should instead collect multiple samples at each distance with the peak signal amplitudes averaged. Additionally, samples should only be taken at a single frequency rather than at two frequencies.